Hello, I'm Nate, aka B2 Mutineer. I make guides and discussion videos about games I like, particularly RPGs. But today, I want to talk about one of my all-time favorite games that isn't an RPG. A game I've been playing since I was a kid that I think is criminally underrated. Thief Deadly Shadows. This is going to be kind of a retrospective review, but I have to be honest about this up front. I'm not going to be able to be very objective towards this game because I just have so many positive memories with it. Another reason why I can't be as critical towards it as I can be towards other games, even among my favorites, is that there's actually very few stealth games out there, and even fewer that I've played. I have very particular tastes in games, and that means overall way fewer games appeal to me, so considering my extremely limited experience with the genre, with Dishonored 1 and 2 being really the only other games I've played which qualify, I just don't have that many expectations or requirements for a stealth game, which probably makes me more lenient towards it. Before we get into the retrospective, I want to take a moment to say a special thank you to my members who help keep this channel running. I'd really appreciate it if you'd consider joining the channel as a member to support me and unlock perks like early access to videos. Joining is very much appreciated, but not required. I am always thankful, even if you just take the time to like the video and maybe leave a comment. Back to Thief. A little bit of context on the game. Thief Deadly Shadows is the third installment in the Thief series of stealth games. The first two were developed by Looking Glass Studios, while this third one was developed by Ion Storm. All three published by Eidos Interactive. Some players were disappointed, I guess, with this third entry because it wasn't the same as the first two Thief games. I personally never played those, and Deadly Shadows was my first and only Thief game I played until the Disaster reboot of 2014, so it's my favorite. Even if I played those older titles now, the amount of love and nostalgia I have for Deadly Shadows can't be surpassed. And from the gameplay that I've watched of the first two Thief games, they do seem a little bit too old for my tastes. I have had this game since 2005 or 2006. That's around the time I got my own computer, and when I saw the cool cover of this game, I knew I had to have it. I convinced my mom to buy it for me at the store, and afterwards when we came home, I also asked her to read the back of the case and the manual with me. I was quite young and didn't know so many words in English, so I wanted to make sure that I understood everything I needed to about the game. I'm going to read a bit from the original cover and manual I have from way back then, and also leaf a bit through the manual for you. I really miss buying games physically like this, reading through the manuals and seeing cool art and screenshots that make me excited to play, so I hope you enjoy this trip down memory lane. Welcome to the ultimate stealth experience. You are Garrett, a master thief. Rarely seen, but never caught. Moving silently through the shadows, you are able to sneak past any guard, pick any lock, break into the most ingeniously secured residences. Stealing from the wealthy is all in a night's work. In this intense thriller of murderous conspiracy, you must use your stealth tactics to uncover a sinister secret that lies within the city walls. Will your skills be enough to save the dying city? Can you survive betrayal, assassins, and war in the labyrinth of city streets? Wasn't that fun? I do love how dramatic these back covers used to be. Now let's look a bit through the manual. I was absolutely in love with these glyphs, especially this one that kind of looks like an eye. I actually have 3 glyphs from here tattooed on my forearm, and I think I'm going to get a couple more of them, including the one that's used as a game icon. Anyway, look at how nice these pages look with black and green everywhere. Instructions on how to install the game, because back then things tended to be a bit more complicated and you had to do some things manually. The game's controls, which of course you could also see in the options menu and rebind, but it's nice to have them. Plus, stealth tips. Avoid toe-to-toe combat. The guards are tough. Use stealth to defeat them. Hide in the shadows and avoid bright areas. Use the light gem to see how visible you are. If it appears dark, you're practically invisible to nearby opponents. If it's bright, you're partially or fully visible. Be silent. Your footsteps are quieter when you move slowly, and avoid loud surfaces like metal. Avoid stumbling over boxes or barrels. Observe your opponent's patterns before you move. To avoid being caught, move when your enemy's back is turned. To assess your own powers of stealth, listen to your opponents. A suspicious person voices concern and starts searching for you. Move carefully away and find a good hiding spot. If you are well hidden, your opponent will give up the search. Opponents oblivious to your presence can be knocked out in a single hit. Sneak up behind the enemy, then attack with a blackjack, dagger, or broadhead arrow. Of course, these tips may not seem like much to a modern player who has played stealth games, or at least games with stealth mechanics before, but back when I was a kid, reading these stealth tips was genuinely helpful because I had never played a stealth game before and had no idea what to expect. Not that I ever got particularly good at stealth gameplay, mind you, no matter how much I played Thief and later on Dishonored. Moving on to my favorite part, the story. Cynical and unenthusiastic about helping those in need, Garrett draws on his talents to lift from the wealthy solely for his own gain. To him, everyone is a potential victim who can help line his pockets and fuel the underground economy of the city. He's a legend among his own kind, a reluctant anti-hero who wants nothing more than to be left alone to carry out his trade. But instead, his actions seem to always draw him into greater conflicts. The Keepers pull the strings behind the city, and lately, they've been paying close attention to Garrett. A little too close in his opinion. This secret organization drew Garrett into its fold early on, but he rejected their teachings at a young age and scorned them for their reclusive meddling. He went on to become a skilled thief, the best one that ever was, in fact. The Keepers have long recognized Garrett as a central figure in their glyph book of prophecies, which warns of an awakening evil and an impending dark age. They have come to Garrett in hopes that his steady nerves and legendary talent can save the city from a dark, uncertain future. What the Keepers did not foresee in this reluctant alliance is that Garrett has come dangerously close to untangling the city's darkest secrets. I genuinely do think the story and in general the writing in Deadly Shadows is very well done. There's something special about Garrett's personality combining with an ominous dark threat getting closer and closer to engulfing the city. It's actually really scary at times too, so much so that for a long time as a kid I couldn't finish the game because I was too scared to play through the Cradle mission. The first time I finally got past it was because I asked one of my cousins to play through it for me while I watched and was still very scared. I never liked horror. The second time, I really wanted to be able to get through the level on my own, so I turned off the game's sound completely and played through the mission as quickly as possible. Of course, it wasn't so easy since I couldn't hear the monsters, but I was completely freaked out by the sound effects and music of the mission. Even today, I'm freaked out by it, though of course it's not as bad as when I was a kid. But if you do get past the Cradle mission, what's on the other side is really freaky, menacing. They absolutely nailed the atmosphere of the city and its dark secrets. I won't give you spoilers for the game's story if you haven't played it, because I think it's best to experience it for yourself if you're interested. But all I'll say is that the last few missions of Deadly Shadows genuinely felt like the climax of the story and were very satisfying to play through and bring everything to a conclusion. When it comes to gameplay, I think Deadly Shadows manages to feel quite good and not really old-fashioned as can be the case with other games from the 90s or early 2000s. The control scheme is fairly standard for the most part, and even if there's something you don't like about it, you can rebind it however you like. The only weird controls for me are the crouch key being X as a default instead of C, and the consumable items being linked to the function keys on the keyboard. To be fair, there's regular weapons and arrows on the regular number keys, so I guess they didn't think about making a radio menu for the consumables, which is what I would do and what modern games tend to do instead of having the player select things with keys. The most fascinating thing is the light gem, which shows you how visible you are to others. It's not just visibility in terms of light and shadow though. You see the gem light up if you run or move over a particularly noisy floor, like a metal grate. If you knock something over or throw an item, the NPCs will react to it if they're nearby, and characters will also sometimes notice missing items, open doors, fires that have been put out, knocked out or dead characters of course, bloodstains and so on. I didn't even know this until reading through a guide as I was preparing to write the script, but you can actually clean bloodstains by using a water arrow on them. Insane. I genuinely didn't think that a game from 2004 could be this advanced. Keep in mind that in the early 2000s, the kinds of games I had played were either kids games like Timon and Pumbaa's Jungle Adventures, Tarzan and Hercules, or various games my older cousins and other family friends were playing like Diablo 2, Warcraft 3, and Heroes of Might and Magic 3. I'll eventually make videos about a lot of these games because they were the games of my childhood, but Thief for me was something different. and it felt far more immersive and advanced than anything else I'd played until then. Like, the reason why the light gem is so cool is that it makes perfect sense, and it also helps you navigate through the levels without having to add things like icons above a character's head if they're getting suspicious. In other stealth games like Dishonored, you don't have a way to gauge how hidden you are except to look at nearby NPCs and see, in quite a non-immersive way with a large icon above their head, whether they start getting suspicious. I much rather prefer the light gem because I think it's a fairly immersive way to gamify your conspicuousness. Garrett has a good understanding of how noticeable he is because he's a master thief who's had to study everything there is to know about light, shadow, movement, and sound to be able to keep stealing without getting caught. That light gem essentially just represents Garrett's experience and awareness, while of course also helping the player progress through the levels. There's a bunch of really cool fantasy-ish items that you have access to, such as water arrows to put out fires from torches, fireplaces, that kind of thing. Moss arrows are actually pretty nice to have in areas that are predominantly full of metal surfaces because they form a patch of moss on top of the surface, allowing you to move more quietly. Noisemaker arrows can be shot to divert enemies' attention away from the area you want to walk through. Gas arrows and gas bombs cause NPCs to pass out. Flash bombs can be used to temporarily blind enemies and quickly get out of a sticky situation while they recover. You do have some more aggressive options like explosive mines, fire arrows, and a dagger in case you want to take out enemies more permanently. Some things like undead can only be stopped by holy water or fire, which I think is a nice touch, but overall you have your trusty lockpicks and blackjack, and the game definitely pushes you more towards sneaking and knocking out enemies at most. But even if you kill mercenaries, guards, or monsters at higher difficulties, the game straight up has a rule against killing non-hostile NPCs. I really like that rule, and frankly, I wish it existed for all of the difficulties, because Garrett just doesn't have any reason whatsoever to kill regular people. He's not an assassin, he's not a killer, he's just a thief, the best one at that. The dagger you have doesn't really do very well in an actual fight against guards, though in a pinch you could probably fell one or two of them if you have enough health potions to guzzle while swinging your tiny dagger at them. I do appreciate having the more aggressive items though, because it gives you more ways to approach a particular mission in terms of how you deal with hostile NPCs. And especially when it comes to actual monsters you need to get past, it feels quite nice to destroy them since they're really freaky and very dangerous. The game is structured into 10 big missions, broken up by being able to explore the city in between them, stealing some extra stuff and hearing or finding secrets, selling your loot to fences, buying new items from black market shops, and so on. There's even a completely optional mission that you can obtain if you let guards catch you and beat you down. This mission, to escape out of Pavlok prison, was probably the origin story of my love for levels in games where your gear is taken away from you, and you have to scavenge and progress through the level by being resourceful, and eventually get your stuff back. My favorite mission, other than the escape from prison, is the second one at Rutherford Castle, because there isn't something quite so satisfying as stealing from a fancy castle, and I really like the way the castle looks. It also feels very fun to explore it. It's made even more fun if you use the Thief 3 Gold mod that removes loading screens from various areas and lets you explore everything in one big level. The castle originally had 2 sections, but with Thief 3 Gold you can just explore the entire castle. There's plenty of interesting loot and little secrets you can find, conversations you can overhear from various NPCs, little notes and journal entries you can read through. And this is of course throughout the entire game, not just the Rutherford Castle. But I think this mission, being the first real mission you go through after the tutorial mission at the Blue Heron Inn, does a great job to introduce you to the world and story, while also expanding upon the gameplay you've just learned through the tutorial. As I said, I'm not actually that good at stealth games, so even when I was playing on easy difficulty as a kid, I still had trouble with some of the guards and sections of various missions. I got somewhat better now, so I'm able to play through hard and maybe even expert difficulty with only some trouble. But I'm mentioning my lack of skill because I know some people really care about games being challenging enough for them. I can't tell you whether the game is too easy or if it does provide a decent amount of challenge if you play it on expert. I do know that with the sneaky upgrade package that includes Thief 3 Gold, you can actually adjust some things related to difficulty to possibly make the game harder, so if you're a skilled player looking for even higher difficulty than what the original game offers, that may be something you're interested in. For me, the game feels more than challenging enough. However, I think you as the player are meant to feel skilled and like things are somewhat easy, simply due to the entire story being framed around Garrett being a master thief. If everything felt too much like a struggle, it would take away from the power fantasy of inhabiting such a proficient protagonist. Moving on to the world. I've already mentioned to some extent that I enjoy the exploration aspect of Deadly Shadows. There isn't super much I can say about the level design since I know the areas so well that anything weird or possibly not well designed wouldn't register as such for me anymore. Whenever I travel through the city's districts, I just feel a sense of home and comfort. The missions, I think, have a very solid level design because usually you can approach most areas in multiple ways. Only a few key items are gatekept behind achieving certain objectives and gaining certain keys or bypassing a particular obstacle. But for the most part, you're free to explore the entire area, find as much regular and special loot as you can. On higher difficulties, you're actually required to steal at least a certain amount of loot and find at least a few pieces of special loot. I personally like to spend as much time as I need to find 100% of the loot in most missions, other than the Cradle mission, which still gives me the creeps. I really love that they added the city as a hub where you can rest between missions, listen to people talking about what has changed, possibly even see some consequences of missions you've completed. And more importantly, you actually get to personally fence off the items you've stolen. There are multiple fences in the city, and they specialize in certain types of loot, so you won't be able to sell all your stuff to any fence, and have to go and find the right one to sell your specific valuable pieces to. Same thing with the shops that are scattered around the city. They have different things for sale, and different shopkeepers too, obviously. I always thought it was a very nice touch to have the shopkeepers and fences talking to you whenever you visit their shop. Each of them has their own personality and vibe. There's one shopkeeper I'm thinking of right now who seemed to me to be quite a big fan of Garrett's, which I always imagine made Garrett feel a bit awkward since he didn't seem to really care about any of the infamy. He just stole because he liked it and was good at it. There are a bunch of factions of people in the city, as well as in the various mission levels you go to. There's first of all regular people who aren't hostile to you. If you don't do something suspicious or scary next to them, they won't have anything against you in the city. Though, of course, if you're sneaking around a place you shouldn't be in a mission, that's a different story, and they'll run away to try to alert the guards and hide from you. There's different types of regular people. Peasants are poorer, and aristocrats have more loot you can steal, like necklaces, rings, even pouches of money, that kind of thing. You may need to knock them out to be able to steal something that's attached to them, like a necklace. Regular people also tend to be quite chatty, so I'd always recommend standing around a little bit to see if they start to say something. Definitely heard some fun or interesting things listening to servants and other people in missions and in the city, though of course this bit with listening for gossip or clues absolutely applies to the other human factions as well. The other possibly non-hostile group towards you are the thugs, who may occasionally beat people up or get into scraps with the city guard. They may also become hostile towards you, but not always. Depends on whether you do something suspicious when they're around. They don't tend to be very bright in terms of their voice lines, but they can be quite funny to provoke into becoming suspicious, so they unsheath their swords, and then getting them to a place where the guards are, so that they start killing each other. You can even get a couple of thugs to turn on each other in Stone Market. I don't remember which particular part of the district. There's two thugs who have a map of the Hammerite Temple and are planning on doing a heist. You can steal the map that one of them has, and then he'll think his thug partner stole it, and they'll fight each other until one of them's dead. Since it's not a main story spoiler, I figured I'd mention this particular scenario because it always makes me smile when I do it. The City Guard are, of course, the main hostile faction to look out for, at least in the first few missions and while walking around in the city. They will absolutely attack you on sight no matter what, since Garrett has been wanted for his crimes for a long time. And of course, you may even get taken to prison if you get caught and beaten up by them in the city the first time. Definitely, after you escape from the prison, they won't care about capturing Garrett alive anymore and will just kill him. I really do like that Garrett only has a little dagger in this game because it makes the guards actually quite scary, especially if they swarm you. Unless you have stuff like explosive mines or gas bombs or oil flasks combined with fire arrows, it's quite hard to deal with large groups of enemies in direct combat. And I like it that way. The guards should absolutely pose enough of a danger to feel like the main antagonists or obstacles in your way. I like their uniform too. Don't know why, but there's something very neat about their chainmail, guard insignia, and simple metal swords. They're very fun to listen to as well. The keepers are weird in a good way. They tried to train Garrett in their mystical future prophesizing ways, but he ran away and became a thief instead. They are mysterious and very cool, and I love all of their glyphs so much so that I have some as tattoos. Honestly, I kind of wish there was even more to do with keeper glyphs in the game, or that they were something a fourth Thief game would have used more. Unfortunately, the reboot didn't seem to care all that much about the coolest faction ever. There's some very interesting cutscenes between missions that involve the keepers, so make sure not to skip them because they're cool. And then you have the Pagans and the Hammerites. I'll be honest with you, I still don't fully understand what is up with these weirdos. The Pagans follow some weird supernatural nature and blood magic stuff, and the Hammerites follow some weird industrial, religious, supernatural fire magic stuff. Both factions are extremely zealous in their beliefs and don't really care if they have to kill people to follow their beliefs. The Hammerites are the civilized faction, following the builder, creator of all civilization. But they're very aggressive and force people to obey or else they get the hammer. Pagans are the wild or chaotic faction who are trying to get nature to take over and despise technological advancement. They pray to the Trickster, an ancient god of nature and chaos, and they have like super weirdos among their ranks like shamans with magical powers and even beast-like creatures. They're uber cool, by the way, if my description doesn't do them justice. The mission where you explore the pagan sanctuary feels very unique, like it generally feels like you've stepped into a very different world than the regular goings-on of the city. There's also another faction, if you can call it that, undead creatures and some secret freaky stuff at the end of the game I don't want to spoil. Not very much to say about the undead creatures, other than the fact that they're quite scary since you generally need to use a holy water flask or else some fire arrows to get rid of them, and they're quite persistent in following you once they've noticed you. Of course, we can't just talk about the world without talking about the city itself. I am absolutely fascinated with the fact that the city is called just that and nothing else. No mention of what country we're in, what the ruler of the country is like, or how the country is doing. It is so interesting and different to be part of a place that feels so isolated from an outside world that you're not even sure exists. It has the effect of enhancing the eerie atmosphere and overall making the main story's stakes feel more impactful. Because if nothing else other than the city exists for Garrett, if something apocalyptic or otherwise terrible were to befall the city, what would happen to Garrett? Where would he go? It very much feels like the city is Garrett's one and only home, like the city is an integral part of Garrett, and he wouldn't be the same person without it. I don't know whether this was a conscious storytelling decision made by the writers for the specific goal of enhancing the player's experience, or if it was just a way for them to cut costs by spending less time on coming up with world-building details for a larger country or world that ultimately wouldn't really matter if the entire game was only taking place in the city. I'd be very curious to find out if there are any interviews or talks any of the original writers did about the Thief series and the world building. But no matter their intent, it ended up being a great narrative choice. The city feels alive like an entity, ever-present, oppressive, but it also feels like home. Moving on to sound design. Sound is an absolutely integral part of games, but especially stealth games require extremely good sound design. Since the sound emitted by the player character is used to make NPCs suspicious, you need the sound made by the PC's movements and actions to be very clear to the player. Not only that, you need to think of and implement enough sounds made by NPCs so that the player can tell how close they are based on footsteps and voice lines, sounds of doors opening and closing, and so on. Deadly Shadows does a great job with sound design in this particular area. Of course, being an older game, that means the sound effects aren't as detailed or complex as more modern games like Dishonored, but that wouldn't be something to criticize at the time it was released. Even so, the sound design around stealthing is very solid. What I want to highlight in this section though is the music and voice acting. The music has this eerie, industrial yet fantastical sound to it. You've been listening to various songs from the soundtrack composed by Eric Brosius throughout this video actually. It's a very unique sound that I 100% associate with Thief. Eric Brosius wrote the music for the entire Thief trilogy, so yeah, this is a very distinctive element of the series that I think ended up being completely lost in the reboot with a very Hans Zimmer style soundtrack that had no place in a stealth game, frankly. Eidos looked way too much at Dishonored for inspiration for some reason for their Thief reboot, when Dishonored was actually inspired by Thief. That's a weird way to develop your original IP, but anyway. The soundtrack of Deadly Shadows is definitely up there among my favorite game soundtracks. The voice acting is another beloved and distinctive part of Thief, mainly due to the voice of Stephen Russell, who voices Garrett, as well as some other guards, in particular the funny-sounding one. Stephen Russell is Garrett, as far as I'm concerned. He managed to convey exactly the kind of anti-hero personality that I think the writers were going for. Even now, after so many years of playing through Deadly Shadows, I still love to listen to the entire briefing and mission end bits that are narrated by Garrett. Such good voice acting. And the various NPCs are also very well voice acted. Everyone in this city is a bit over the top, which fits very well with the way the city's world building enhances the eerie atmosphere and feeling of importance, as I mentioned earlier. Sometimes the over-the-top personality of the NPCs is funny, which is a welcome reprieve from the oppressive and dark tone. Other times, for pagans and Hammerites especially, it's quite off-putting and scary in a good way, reminding you that these people are very different, think differently, and act differently, and can be very dangerous to Garrett and others. You are constantly reminded of this stark contrast between the regular people and the factions staying mostly in the shadows, doing all sorts of supernatural shit and controlling the city. So overall, the game's sound design is very much on point and works well to enhance the vibe the game is going for. Next up, I do need to talk a bit about the game's performance. Since it's quite an old game, you can have trouble running it on modern hardware and operating systems. The most important thing by far is to have VSync enabled, because otherwise you can get stuck and be unable to progress due to the lockpicking minigame not initializing properly. However, I can't say how well the vanilla game works on Windows 10 or 11, because since I made the upgrade to these two operating systems, I've been using the Thief 3 Sneaky Upgrade mod, which takes care of a lot of issues you may have running the game, lets you play at different resolutions, scale the UI to your preference, change things like FOV, and even difficulty-related settings. I haven't noticed any issues with the game if I play with a Sneaky Upgrade, so I hope that will be the case for you too. I have the Steam version of the game, though as you've seen, I also have my old physical copy. It seems to work okay, but then again, I don't really mind a few issues here and there, especially with older games. This mod package includes a bunch of different mods, most of which I don't necessarily recommend. I really only use some of the basic settings from the Sneaky Upgrade and the Thief 3 Gold mod from the entire list. The Collective Texture Pack may also be good, but I've had some issues with the brightness, so I kept the game as unmodded as possible to resolve that. Don't know if it was just something about my monitor or display settings, but eventually without the texture pack, the dark parts of the game looked good enough for me to be able to see what I was doing, so that's all I care about. Keep in mind that when you use this mod pack, if you turn on or off Thief 3 Gold and or Minimalist Project gameplay modifications, then you won't be able to play any save games that aren't using the same combination of these two mods. As I said, I only used the Thief 3 Gold one, mainly because I like that it removes a lot of loading screens and combines multiple smaller areas into a bigger one during missions. It fixes a lot of bugs too. I don't like the Minimalist Project because it changes too many things about the game, and I especially don't like the part of it that changes the visuals of the menus. I love the original, so I don't like having so many aspects of it fiddled with, but your mileage may vary. You can go ahead and try out various combinations of mods. Just keep in mind that these two specifically do have an effect on which save games you're able to load. So experiment with these changes while you're playing through the tutorial mission so that you don't lose much progress once you've decided on a particular mod combination. Overall, the game's performance is perfectly fine with the Sneaky Upgrade, but I don't know how playable the game is without it, so that's why I recommend you use it. In conclusion, Thief Deadly Shadows is a really solid stealth game. Even though I obviously have strong nostalgia for it since I've been playing it for almost 2 decades now, I can still recognize that considering the general lack of stealth games, Deadly Shadows stands the test of time as one of the classics. even if it's overshadowed by the first two Thief titles and criticized unfairly, in my opinion, for the fact that it dared to not be an exact copy of those games. It does have smaller level sizes, lack of swimming, and more loading screens in the vanilla version, mainly because it was also released for consoles and had to work around the limitations of the console hardware. But I think the lacking bits of Deadly Shadows have been exaggerated to a ludicrous degree by the hardcore fans of Thief 1 and 2. Deadly Shadows, as far as I can tell based on watching playthroughs of the first two games, actually refines many core elements from the series, has even better sound design, NPC AI that notices way more details, plus of course the addition of the city as a hub to explore, gather clues, fence stolen items, and purchase gear. More than anything, Thief Deadly Shadows is a really well-designed game because it knows exactly what it is. The first Thief game, The Dark Project, was an experiment, and most of the team didn't even really know they were making a stealth game until very late in the process. Thief 2, The Metal Age, improved a lot of stuff, but I do still think it looks a bit clunky. With Deadly Shadows, no matter what flaws may or may not be there based on your expectations of it, it's 100% a stealth game that was designed to feel good as a stealth game. And for that, I think it deserves a lot more praise than it got. To be fair, in the 2000s and very early 2010s, we had a lot of great games, and I think players were becoming a bit snobbish with their expectations that every new game had to be bigger and better, have more features, upgraded graphics, tons more content, and so on. We were in the golden age of games with some of the best ever made, and we had no idea how good we had it until games started getting really quite shitty from around the mid-2010s onwards. By the way, if you're watching this soon after I posted the video, there's a huge discount on GOG for Deadly Shadows until the 3rd of April 2025, so you can pick it up for just €1. Literally €1. That's insane. I can't even buy a cup of coffee that cheap. When I bought it back in 2005, it was around 50–60 euros. Even if you're watching this later, if you're interested in picking up the game, it's worth checking both Steam and GOG since I imagine it's very often on sale. If you like stealth games, I highly recommend it, especially because you can find it so cheap, so even if you don't click with it, you won't have wasted more than a few euros or dollars at most. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look back at Thief Deadly Shadows, one of my most played childhood games and a game I still love playing today. I always enjoy making these kinds of videos talking about my favorite games, since they're quite old and I don't really have the opportunity to talk about them much. If you're looking forward to more videos about games I like, do remember to subscribe and leave a like and comment while you're at it too. They really help. This has been B Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.